One morning, Kerubo awoke to find her sheets soaked in blood. She screamed, calling for her maids who rushed to help. When they entered her room, they couldn't help but cover their noses. The princess was smelling like rotten fish. The sun was high in the sky as Princess Kerubo walked through the market square, her silk dress shimmering with every step. Her beauty was unmatched, with skin as smooth as polished ivory and eyes that sparkled like the stars. She looked like a goddess. She was admired by many but loved by a few. Kerubo knew that she was beautiful than any woman in the village, and because of this her heart darkened with pride. When the villagers saw the princess, they parted for her like the Red Sea, kneeling down and bowing their heads as she passed. Some murmuring greetings, others too afraid to speak. Kerubo stopped before an old man selling yams. "You call these yams? They are pitiful and disgusting. They look as tired as you." Kerubo sneered, covering her nose in disgust. "Do better, old fool, or I'll tell my father to shut down your business." The man bowed deeply, murmuring an apology, but the princess had already moved on, her maids following her with fear in their eyes. Her beauty was unmatched in the kingdom, but her cruelty left a bitter taste in the hearts of the people. Yet no one dared to confront her. She was the beloved daughter of King Nyachai, and any criticism was met with punishments. Her father adored her. He had raised her in a life of luxury and privilege, spoiling her at every turn, and everyone was expected to obey her. On one fateful afternoon, as the sun beat down on the village, Princess Kerubo was making her usual walk through the marketplace when she saw a pregnant woman, worn and weary, sitting on the side of the road. The woman's face was pale with exhaustion. She was a poor beggar, but Kerubo saw nothing but a lowly, pathetic woman. When the pregnant poor woman saw the princess approaching, she struggled to rise and kneel but found herself too weak. She remained seated, hoping the princess would pass her by unnoticed. But the princess's sharp eyes had already caught her, and without warning, Princess Kerubo stopped in front of her. "How dare you?" Kerubo's voice sliced through the air, drawing the attention of the onlookers. "Do you not know who I am? How dare you sit in my presence? Did you not see me, the almighty princess of this land?" The poor beggar lowered her gaze and spoke softly. "Please, forgive me, my princess. I am heavy with child, and I have had nothing to eat yet. I am too weak. I can't even stand." Kerubo's lips curled into a sneer. "Excuses! You're nothing but a lazy, pathetic beggar looking for pity. Kneel and greet me properly, or I'll teach you a lesson you won't forget." The crowd grew silent, their faces filled with fear and pity for the beggar. The beggar had tears streaming down her face, begging for forgiveness. "Please, my princess, I mean no disrespect. Have mercy on me, please." Kerubo's anger boiled over. Without a second thought, she raised her hand and struck the poor beggar hard across the face. The force of the slap sent the pregnant beggar sprawling to the ground. Gasps erupted from the crowd as blood began to pool beneath her. "You'll think twice before disrespecting me again," Kerubo hissed, brushing her hands off as if the encounter had sullied her. She turned to her maids and ordered them to follow. "Leave her there. She got what she deserved." The villagers rushed to the poor beggar's side as Kerubo walked away, her laughter ringing out over the cries of the injured woman. The beggar's breathing was shallow, and her hands clutched her belly as her tears mixed with the dirt beneath her. The women who gathered around her wasted no time. They carried her to the village healer, their hearts heavy with fear for both her life and the life of the unborn child. The poor beggar lay on the thin mattress, her face pale and her body weak as the village healer attended to her. The healer, an elderly woman with a knowing gaze, examined the pregnant beggar. She has lost the child, she said sadly, shaking her head. There's nothing else I can do. Her baby is gone. When the beggar regained her consciousness and learnt of her loss, her cries echoed through the small hut. She had lost her baby, and the image of the princess's sneering face haunted her. In the days that followed, the poor beggar went to the palace. The king, who adored his daughter, was reluctant to hear her accusations, but the woman insisted, begging for justice. "Your Majesty," she began, tears staining her face. "The princess caused me to lose my child. She struck me in the market and humiliated me. I am a beggar, but I am still a woman who deserves respect." King Nyachai listened to her words, his brow furrowing with concern. But when he turned to Princess Kerubo, who stood beside him with a cold expression, his heart softened. "My daughter will never harm anyone intentionally," the king said, his voice filled with a father's love. "You must have done something to provoke her." The woman's heart sank. "But Your Majesty, I was pregnant and weak. I really tried to kneel, but I couldn't. You shall punish her for what she did to me." The king waved his hand dismissively. "Enough of this. My daughter is not to blame. Go back to your hut, woman, and never speak ill of the princess again, or I'll punish you myself." Princess Kerubo smiled behind her father's back, a victorious glint in her eyes. She had once again avoided punishment. As the poor beggar left the palace feeling humiliated and hopeless, she cursed the princess aloud, raising her voice as she cried, "Princess Kerubo, for your cruelty and pride I curse you. May you bleed every day as I bled, and may the stench and smell of your wickedness drive all those who love you away. You will know no happiness, only pain and suffering." And with that, she left the palace. At first, Kerubo dismissed the whispers of the curse the beggar had left as foolish ramblings of a grieving beggar. She continued her life as usual, reveling in her beauty and basking in the admiration of her countless suitors. But within days, strange symptoms began to appear. One morning, Kerubo awoke to find her sheets soaked in blood. She screamed, calling for her maids who rushed to help. When they entered her room, they couldn't help but cover their noses. The princess was smelling like rotten fish. Despite their efforts to stop the bleeding, it continued slowly but relentless. And then there was the smell. No matter how much Princess Kerubo bathed, the foul odor clung to her. Kerubo couldn't believe this. She tried everything, but still she stinked. The once proud princess became a prisoner in her own chambers. Her maids, unable to endure the stench, worked with clothes tied around their noses. Others even quit their jobs, unable to tolerate her smelling anymore. They said they couldn't tolerate someone who was rotting beneath her skin. The princess spent the next few days in isolation, hoping the bleeding would stop, but it didn't. The smell became unbearable, and her beauty, once admired by all, began to fade. For the first time in her life, Kerubo felt the sting of rejection, and for the first time, she began to fear. King Nyachai sat in his grand throne room, his face full of frustration. The servants whispered about his daughter's condition, but none dared speak openly. His beloved Kerubo, the apple of his eye, had not left her chamber in days. When he summoned her, Kerubo entered, her face pale and her eyes filled with tears. But still, her smell was overpowering, and her father the king struggled to remain normal. Kerubo bowed low before her father, an act so unlike her that it sent a chill through the room. "Father, something is wrong. I cannot stop bleeding, and there's a smell, an awful smell that I cannot rid myself of." The king couldn't bear seeing her daughter in such a state. He called upon the kingdom's finest healers and medicine men. They examined Kerubo, performed rituals, and offered expensive herbs, but nothing worked. One after another, they admitted their failure. Some hinted at a supernatural cause, but the king dismissed such ideas as nonsense. The king's desperation grew as Kerubo's condition worsened. Her beauty faded, and she became withdrawn, refusing to face anyone except the maids and the king. As Kerubo's struggles became public, the villagers rejoiced. She's paying for her cruelty, they said, their laughter echoing through the palace walls. Those she had once humiliated now mocked her openly, finding satisfaction in her downfall. The villagers mimicked Kerubo's haughty walk, covering their noses as if she were nearby. At the market, women gathered to share stories of Kerubo's cruelty. Do you remember how she made my grandmother kneel in the mud just to greet her? One woman asked. Yes, my sister, another replied laughing. Now she can't even walk among us without shame. Kerubo heard these stories through her maids, who could no longer hide the villagers' disdain. She locked herself in her chambers, refusing to eat or speak to anyone. Her once bright eyes were now dull with regrets. As Kerubo's condition worsened, her suitors began to abandon her. The noblemen who once visited the palace with gifts and promises now sent letters distancing themselves from the disgraced princess. One morning, Kerubo's maid handed her a stack of sealed letters. Excited, Kerubo thought the suitors were sending her comforting words, perhaps even pleading for a hand in marriage despite her condition. However, her joy turned to anguish as she read each one. Dearest princess, one letter read, I must sadly withdraw my proposal due to unforeseen circumstances. I wish you a quick recovery. Another one was cruelly direct. Your reputation now precedes you, and it is no longer fitting for me to align myself with the royal family. I cannot marry a woman who is both cursed and smells like a rotten corpse. Those letters devastated Kerubo. Once the pride of the kingdom, she now faced rejection from men who had once lavished her with praises and gifts. One day, the chief priest came to the king with a message. Don't spend any more resources trying to find a cure for the princess, he said. Medicine men and healers cannot cure your daughter. Your daughter was cursed by the beggar she humiliated in the village, and when she lost her baby and there was no punishment given to the princess, she cursed her. Only the beggar can heal the princess. Only the beggar can lift the curse that she placed on the princess. Only the beggar can heal her. The king, desperate to save his daughter, ordered his guards to find the beggar woman. Messengers were sent to every corner of the kingdom carrying royal decrees and rewards for anyone who could provide information about her whereabouts, but she was nowhere to be found. Days turned into weeks, but the woman was nowhere to be found. Some villagers claimed she had left the village, heartbroken by the loss of her child. Others whispered that she had vanished into the forest, seeking refuge from the cruel world. She's gone, Your Majesty, the head guard reported one morning. She's nowhere to be found. It is as if she vanished into thin air. The king's face fell. His only hope of saving Kerubo had disappeared, leaving him powerless to stop the curse that was slowly destroying her. Meanwhile, Kerubo's life became even more unbearable. The bleeding drained her strength, and the stench that accompanied her condition made her an outcast even within the palace. Servants avoided her chambers, leaving food and clean clothes at her door. The once lavish banquets and dances Kerubo enjoyed were now distant memories. Her maids whispered behind her back, and Kerubo felt alone and hopeless. As months passed, the villagers began to speculate about the beggar woman's disappearance. Some believed she had died from grief after losing her child. Others thought she had ascended to the spirit world, leaving behind a curse too powerful to break. That woman was no ordinary woman. An elder murmured around the evening fire. Perhaps she was sent by the gods to teach the princess a lesson. The villagers nodded in agreement. One sleepless night, Princess Kerubo summoned her last reserves of strength and decided to take matters into her own hands. If the woman cannot be found, she thought, then I must prove to the gods and the people that I have changed. She began by visiting the villagers she had wronged. With trembling hands, she knocked on the doors of the home she once rejected. I am so sorry, she said to a widow whose children she had insulted. I see now how much pain I caused you. Please forgive me. The widow, taken aback by the princess's humility, said nothing, but her silence was better than the mockery Kerubo had grown used to. Day after day, Kerubo traveled through the village, apologizing to those she had hurt. Some accepted her apology, while others slammed their doors in her face. But the princess persisted. If I will bleed to death, at least let me apologize to those I have wronged and die in peace, Kerubo said to herself. Despite her best efforts, the villagers were not quick to forgive Kerubo. The ones who had suffered most under her cruelty rejected her with cold indifference. Why should I forgive the princess? An old woman scoffed, her arms crossed. Ah, that princess insulted my son. She stole my dignity, and now she comes begging for mercy. She made us kneel. Now let her crawl. Kerubo's heart ached with each rejection, but she didn't give up. Every door slammed in her face only fueled her determination. She spent her days walking through the village, visiting the houses of those she had wronged, enduring their scorns and insults. One day, as Kerubo walked through the village, she heard a familiar voice. "Princess!" Kerubo turned, startled. Standing by her was the beggar woman, the very one who had cursed her. The woman's once somber face had softened, but her eyes still held a quiet power. "You've come back," Kerubo whispered, her voice trembling. "I had lost all hope." Kerubo proceeded to fall to her knees before the woman, her pride now completely shattered. "Please, I am truly sorry for what I did to you and your unborn baby. Please forgive me. I now understand the weight of my cruelty. What can I do to make things right? Please, lift the curse. I can't even stand myself. I smell badly. Please help me." The beggar woman gazed down at her, her expression unreadable. After a long time she spoke. "I will lift the curse, but not because of your words alone. You must show the people that you have changed, not just in your actions, but in your heart. Only then will the gods forgive you." Kerubo's heart raced. "I will do anything. I will serve the people. I will work with them, whatever it takes to prove my sincerity." The beggar woman smiled faintly. "Very well," and with that, she disappeared into the bushes. The next morning, Kerubo went to work in the fields alongside the villagers who had once been her subjects. "I never thought I would see this day," an old man said, watching the princess labor under the hot sun, pulling weeds from the crops. Despite the hard work, the pain she felt in her hands, Kerubo pressed on, determined to prove her worth. Each day, she rose before dawn to join the villagers in the field. Slowly, the villagers began to accept her. Kerubo worked beside them in the field, helped the sick, and even donated some of her belongings to the poor. The bitterness that had once defined her reign began to melt away, replaced by genuine kindness. One by one, the villagers began to offer their forgiveness. And as they did, the curse that had bound Kerubo began to lift. The bleeding stopped, and the smell faded completely. As Princess Kerubo watched the horizon, she felt free. She had paid the price for her arrogance and cruelty, and she had learnt a great lesson about the importance of humility. The lesson that we learn from today's story is that we should not do to others what we wouldn't want to be done to us. Be kind, respectful, and remember that pride comes before a fall. Anyway guys, that was it for today's story. I really hope that you enjoyed it and learned something out of it. I hope to see you in my next video. Kwaheri.